I took the night shift security job at Riverside Mall last winter because I desperately needed money for tuition. I was 24 years old, halfway through college and completely broke. The job paid $12 an hour, which was not great, but for walking around an empty building all night, it seemed easy enough. The mall had been built back in the 70s, and most of the stores had closed down over the years. Only a handful were still operating, mostly on the first floor. My shift ran from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, and I worked completely alone. The day shift guy, Marcus, warned me on my first day that the place had some weird spots, but he never went into detail. He just said to keep my flashlight charged and my phone closed. The building had 3 floors, and I was required to walk through every single hallway, every floor, every 2 hours. The camera system was ancient and half the cameras did not even work anymore. There were huge blind spots all over the place, especially on the 3rd floor where the old food court used to be. That entire section had been closed for at least 5 years. Sometimes homeless people would find their way inside during the day and hide somewhere until night. Part of my job was checking for them and calling the police if I found anyone. I hated that part. It was freezing outside and I felt terrible making someone go back out into the cold, but I had no choice. During my first week, I spent most of my time learning the layout of the building. The 3rd floor was by far the creepiest. It was dark, silent, and smelled like mold and old grease. The food court area had metal gates pulled down over every restaurant, and there was trash scattered everywhere that nobody had bothered to clean up. That was when I found the freezer room. It was tucked away in the far corner of the food court, behind what used to be a Chinese restaurant. The door was heavy metal industrial grade, the kind you would see in a real commercial kitchen. I almost walked past it, but something made me stop. I pulled the door open and immediately got hit with this awful smell, like stagnant air and rust. Inside was a small room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with metal shelving units along the walls. Everything was empty except for some old cardboard boxes that had rotted through. But what really caught my attention was the locking mechanism. On the outside of the door was a large sliding bolt latch, the kind you could lock with a padlock, but there was no handle on the inside, no way to open it from within. I stepped inside for just a second to test it and my stomach dropped. If that door closed, I would be trapped. There was no emergency release, no safety latch, nothing. I quickly walked back out and took a picture of the door with my phone. That night, I sent an email to my supervisor, a guy named Derek, explaining the situation. I told him the room was dangerous and should be sealed off or at least have the latch removed. He responded 2 days later with a single sentence. "That is an old storage area, no longer in use. Do not worry about it." That was it. No concern, no plan to fix it. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do. I decided I would check the room every night during my rounds, but I would never step foot inside again. For the next 2 months, that became part of my routine. Every night, twice a shift, I would walk up to the 3rd floor, shine my flashlight into that freezer room and make sure nobody was hiding in there. I never went inside. I would just open the door, look around, and close it again. But I started having dreams about it. In the dreams, I would be locked inside, banging on the door, screaming, and nobody would hear me. I would wake up sweating, my heart racing. It sounds dramatic, but that room genuinely scared me. Then one Thursday night in late February, I noticed something off. When I went to check the freezer room during my first round at 1 in the morning, the door was open. Not wide open, just cracked about 6 inches. I stopped dead in my tracks. I knew for a fact that I had closed it the night before. I always made sure it was fully shut. I checked the cameras for that area, but of course, it was one of the blind spots. I walked closer, my flashlight raised, and called out, "Security! If anyone is in there, you need to come out right now." Nothing. Silence. I pushed the door open all the way and shined my light inside. The room was empty, just like always. But the fact that the door had been open made my skin crawl. I closed it firmly, made sure the latch was not engaged, and continued my rounds. I sent another email to Derek that night, but again, no response. The next week, I tried to push the whole thing out of my mind. I had other things to worry about. Midterms were coming up and I was behind on studying. But that freezer room stayed in the back of my head. Then came the night everything went wrong. It was a Wednesday, the third week of February. The weather outside was brutal, below freezing with wind that rattled the windows. I started my shift at 11 like always, did my first round at 1 in the morning, and everything seemed fine. By 2:30, I was back at the security desk on the first floor, drinking coffee and scrolling through my phone. That was when I heard it, a noise coming through the intercom system. It was faint, but it sounded like metal scraping against metal. The intercom was connected to speakers all over the building, but it should not have been picking up any sound unless I activated it. I put my phone down and listened. There it was again, a soft clanging noise like someone was moving something heavy. It was coming from the third floor. I checked the cameras, but the ones that still worked showed nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and my walkie-talkie, even though there was nobody on the other end, and headed upstairs. My heart was already beating faster. The third floor was always unsettling, but now it felt worse. The emergency lights cast these dim, sickly shadows across the tile floor. As I walked toward the food court, I saw something that made me stop. A light. Not a flashlight exactly, but a faint glow, like someone was using a phone screen. It moved quickly across the far wall near the freezer room, and then it disappeared. I shouted, "This is security. I can see you. Come out now or I am calling the police." The light did not come back on. Everything went silent. I ran toward the area, my boots echoing in the empty hallway. When I reached the freezer room, my blood went cold. The door was wide open, and sitting just inside the doorway, about 5 feet in, was a black purse. I stood there staring at it, my mind racing. This was a setup, it had to be. Someone wanted me to go inside, but why? I called out again, louder this time. "I am calling the cops right now. You need to leave." Still nothing. I pulled out my phone, but I hesitated. What if someone was hurt? What if the purse belonged to someone who needed help? I know how stupid that sounds now, but in the moment I convinced myself I had to check. I took a step inside, keeping the door propped open with my foot. I leaned down to grab the purse. That was when the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around and lunged for it, but I heard the bolt slide into place. I was locked in. I started pounding on the door with both fists, screaming at the top of my lungs. "Let me out, open the door." But the metal was too thick. My voice did not carry. I pulled out my phone and tried to call 911, no signal. The concrete walls, the metal door, the entire building sitting on top of me, it killed any reception. I tried my walkie-talkie, static. Nothing. I was completely cut off. I stood there in the dark, my flashlight shaking in my hand, trying to control my breathing. I checked the time. 2:53 in the morning. My shift ended at 7. Nobody would come looking for me until the day crew arrived, and even then, they might not find me right away. I turned off my flashlight to save the battery and sat down on the cold floor. My phone was at 3%. I tried to think. Whoever locked me in here did it for a reason. They wanted me out of the way. That meant they were going to do something, probably rob the place. I sat there in total darkness, listening. After about 10 minutes, I heard footsteps outside. They were far away, but I could hear them echoing through the hallways. Then voices, at least two people, whispering to each other. I could not make out the words. I stood up and started pounding on the door again, yelling, "Fire! Fire! Help!" I thought maybe if I screamed fire, someone outside the building might hear and call it in, but nothing happened. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of glass breaking. It was distant, probably from the first floor. A few seconds later, an alarm went off. It was the jewelry store. The alarm blared for maybe 30 seconds and then it stopped. Someone had shut it off. They knew the system. I felt sick. Whoever was out there knew exactly what they were doing. They had planned this. I kept banging on the door every few minutes, shouting until my throat was raw, but nobody came. I checked my phone. Dead. The battery had finally given out. I was alone in the dark with nothing but my flashlight, and I was trying to ration it. I would turn it on for a few seconds just to remind myself where I was, then turn it off again. Time moved so slowly. I tried to stay calm, but my mind kept spiraling. What if nobody found me? What if I was stuck in here for days? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard something different. Footsteps, but slower, heavier. Then a woman's voice. "Hello, is someone there?" I jumped to my feet and started pounding on the door. "Yes, I am in here. Please open the door," I heard her gasp. "Oh my God, hold on." The bolt slid back and the door swung open. Light flooded in and I had to cover my eyes. Standing there was a woman in her 50s wearing a cleaning uniform. Her name tag said Maria. She stared at me wide-eyed. "What happened? How did you get locked in there?" I stumbled out, my legs shaking. "Someone locked me in. I am the security guard. What time is it?" She checked her watch. "It is 6:15. I had been in there for over 3 hours. I thanked her about a dozen times, my voice cracking. She told me she worked the early cleaning shift and usually arrived around 6. She had been walking past and heard me banging on the door. If she had not come early, I might have been in there until 7:30 or later. I immediately pulled out my walkie and radioed for help, but it was still useless. I ran down to the first floor to use the landline at the security desk. I called 911 first, then my supervisor, Derek. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, I was still shaking. I took them through everything that had happened. They searched the building, but whoever had been there was long gone. Then we checked the stores. The jewelry store on the first floor had been broken into. The front glass case was shattered and at least $40,000 worth of gold and diamond jewelry was missing. The electronics store 2 doors down had also been hit. Laptops, phones, tablets, all gone. The cameras had been turned off remotely at 2:45 in the morning, right around the time I got locked in the freezer. Whoever did this knew the security system inside and out. The police dusted the freezer room door and the purse for fingerprints, but they came back clean. The purse had been wiped down. It was just bait, left there to lure me inside. They asked me if I had seen anyone, heard any voices I recognized, anything. But I had nothing. The detective told me they would investigate, but without camera footage or witnesses, it was going to be tough. Derek showed up around 8 in the morning, and instead of asking if I was okay, he immediately started asking why I had left my post. I tried to explain, but he cut me off. He said I should have called the police the second I heard something suspicious instead of going to investigate alone. I told him I did not have time, that it all happened too fast. He did not care. 3 days later, I got an email. I had been fired. The reason given was failure to follow security protocols and abandoning my post during a criminal incident. I could not believe it. I had been locked in a freezer for 3 hours while the place got robbed, and somehow it was my fault. I called Derek and tried to argue, but he would not even talk to me. The company needed someone to blame, and I was the easy target. The thieves were never caught. The police investigated for a few weeks, but the trail went cold. No fingerprints, no footage, no leads. I spent the next month looking for another job, but I refused to take anything that involved working alone at night. I ended up finding a position at a grocery store, stocking shelves during the day. It paid less, but I did not care. I never wanted to be in a situation like that again. Even now, months later, I still have nightmares about that freezer room. I dream that I am back inside, the door slams shut, and nobody ever comes to let me out. I wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. I learned a hard lesson that night. Some places are dangerous not because they are haunted or cursed, but because of the people who know how to use them against you. That freezer room was a trap waiting to happen, and I walked right into it. I had just graduated college and needed a job fast. Student loans were piling up and my savings were running dry. When I saw an opening for an overnight clerk at a 24/7 pharmacy in the suburbs, I applied immediately. The interview was short, and to my surprise, they hired me on the spot. The manager seemed almost too eager to fill the position, but I didn't think much of it at the time. They offered me the night shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. with 20% higher pay than the day shift. I figured it was a decent deal. Fewer customers meant more time to study for my pharmacy tech certification. The first week was quiet. A few people came in for cold medicine or energy drinks. My coworker stayed until midnight, then I was on my own. I thought this job would be perfect for a few months until I found something better. It was a Wednesday night around 1:30 in the morning when things started to feel wrong. A woman in her early 30s walked through the automatic doors. She was wearing jeans and a gray hoodie with her hair pulled back in a ponytail. At first glance, she seemed normal enough, but something was off. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she kept looking around like she was searching for something specific. She wouldn't make eye contact with me. I watched her wander through the aisles for almost 10 minutes. She picked up a pack of gum, an energy drink, and a bottle of over-the-counter pain reliever. When she finally came to the register, she set everything down and looked at me for the first time. "Do you have anything stronger?" she asked. I wasn't sure what she meant. Stronger than what? She pointed at the pain reliever. "This doesn't work anymore. I need something that actually works." I tried to explain as politely as I could. "Anything stronger would require a prescription. I can't sell you that without one." She just stared at me for a few seconds without saying anything. Then she said, "Fine, I'll just take these then." She paid in cash and left. I thought that was the end of it, but when I glanced at the security monitor, I saw her standing outside in the parking lot. She wasn't getting into a car. She was just standing under one of the streetlights, staring back at the store windows. I felt uneasy, but I told myself maybe she was waiting for a ride. Still, something about the way she stood there made my skin crawl. 15 minutes passed and she was still out there. I started to worry. Was she planning to rob the place? Was she watching me to see if I was alone? My mind raced through different scenarios. Then the automatic doors opened again and she walked back in. This time her attitude was different. She seemed irritated and a little aggressive. I changed my mind. "I need to talk to the pharmacist," she said. I explained that there was no pharmacist on duty during the overnight shift, only a sales clerk. She didn't like that answer. "You're lying. Every pharmacy has a pharmacist on duty." I kept my voice calm and patient. "This is a 24-hour store, but we only sell over-the-counter medications at night. Prescription medications are only available starting at 8 in the morning." She raised her voice. "This is ridiculous. I'm in pain. I need help." I tried to stay professional. "I'm sorry, but that's the store policy. I can't help you with prescription medications." Her anger seemed to melt away suddenly and she started to cry. "Please, I just need something to get through the night. My back is killing me. Can't you make an exception?" I felt bad for her, but I knew I couldn't break the rules. I shook my head. "I really can't. I'm sorry." She realized I wasn't going to give in. She wiped her eyes and turned toward the door without another word. But she didn't leave the parking lot. Instead, she sat down on the curb right in front of the store entrance. I watched her on the monitor and felt a knot forming in my stomach. Around 2:15, a beat-up sedan pulled into the lot. A tall man in his 40s with an unkempt beard got out. I watched on the camera as he walked over to the woman. They talked for a minute. She pointed at the pharmacy and seemed to be explaining what happened. The man looked toward the windows and nodded. Then they both walked inside together. The man came straight to the counter. His expression wasn't friendly. "My girlfriend told me you refused to help her," he said. I went through the explanation again. No pharmacist on duty. No prescription medications available until morning. He leaned closer to the counter. "That's not good enough. She's in pain. You need to do something." His tone was threatening. I tried to stay calm. "Sir, I understand, but I'm just following the rules. I could lose my job." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your job? You think I care about your job?" The woman stood behind him, silent, just watching me. The man continued, "Look, we're not leaving until you help us. We can wait all night if we have to." He walked over to the waiting area and sat down. The woman sat next to him. I felt trapped. I couldn't call the police because technically they weren't doing anything illegal. They were just sitting in the store. But the way he looked at me and the way he said those words made it clear this was a threat. I stood behind the counter with my hands shaking, trying to figure out what to do. 30 minutes went by. They just sat there staring at me. No other customers came in, which made everything worse. The man eventually stood up and started walking around the store like he was inspecting it. He looked directly at the security cameras and smiled. Then he walked toward the back door, the one marked employees only. He tried the handle to see if it was locked. My heart was pounding. He came back to the counter. "So where do you keep the good stuff?" "In the back," he asked. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Everything that requires a prescription is locked up. I don't have access to it." He narrowed his eyes. "You don't have access, you work here. Only the pharmacist has the key. I'm just the overnight clerk." He stared at me like he was trying to decide if I was telling the truth. Then he asked, "When does the pharmacist come in?" "8 in the morning," I said. He looked at his watch and then back at me. "Guess we'll be here a while then." He went back to sit down. I glanced at the clock. It was 2:50 in the morning, more than 5 hours until my shift ended. I thought about trying to escape through the back door, but what if he followed me? What if he was faster? I felt like a prisoner in my own workplace. By 3:30, the man was getting restless. He stood up and paced back and forth. He said something to the woman, but loud enough for me to hear. "This is taking too long. We should just do it." The woman shook her head, but she looked nervous too. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. The man turned back to me. "You know what? I think you're lying. I think you do have access." He started walking toward the employee area behind the counter. I backed up against the wall. "Sir, you can't come back here," I said, my voice shaking. "Or what? You'll call the cops," he said. Just then, the automatic doors opened. An older man in work clothes walked in. He looked like he was coming from a night shift job. The aggressive man stopped and turned to look at the new customer. The woman quickly stood up and grabbed the man's arm. "Let's just go. This isn't worth it," she said quietly. The man hesitated. He looked at me, then at the older customer who was now watching the situation carefully. The older man seemed to sense the tension in the air. The woman pulled on the man's arm again. "Come on, we'll find another place." Finally, the man turned toward the door. But before he left, he looked back at me one more time and said, "We know where you work now." The door closed behind them. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The older customer came up to the counter. "You okay, kid? Those people bothering you?" he asked. My hands were still shaking as I told him what happened. He frowned and said, "You should call the police. That's not normal." He offered to stay while I made the call. I dialed 911 and explained the situation to the dispatcher. I told them about the threats and how the man tried to get into the employee area. They said they would send an officer to check on me. The older customer bought a coffee and sat in the waiting area. He said he would wait until the police arrived. 15 minutes later, a patrol car pulled into the lot. I felt a wave of relief. The officer came inside and I told him everything that happened. He asked to see the security footage and wrote down the license plate number of the sedan. "We'll patrol the area tonight. If they come back, call us immediately. Do you want to file a report?" he asked. I hesitated but then nodded. He took down all the details and gave me his direct number. "Call this if anything else happens," he said. The older customer stayed for another 30 minutes just to make sure I was okay before he finally left. I thanked him for staying. The rest of my shift dragged on. Every time a car pulled into the parking lot, I jumped. Every shadow outside made me nervous. When 6 a.m. finally came and my morning coworker arrived, I felt like I could breathe again. I told her what happened. "Stuff like that happens more than you think," she said. "That's why they have trouble keeping overnight staff." I felt betrayed. No one had warned me about this when they hired me. I drove home, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what the man said. "We know where you work now." What if they came back? What if next time there was no one else around to stop them? That afternoon, I called my manager and asked if I could switch to the day shift. He sighed. "We don't have any daytime openings right now. Can you stick it out for a few more weeks? I thought about it for a long time. The extra money was good, but was it worth the risk? I called him back an hour later and quit. It wasn't worth my safety. 2 weeks later, I drove past the pharmacy and saw a sign in the window. Hearing. Overnight shift. I smiled bitterly. They were always going to be short-staffed for that shift. Now I work at a different place during the day. The pay is lower, but I don't have to worry about someone threatening me or trying to force their way behind the counter. Sometimes I still think about that night, and I'm grateful that older customer walked in when he did. I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't. I started working the night shift at the quick stop convenience store right off Interstate 40 back in early 2019. The pay was better than day shifts, and honestly, I needed the money. I was 24, living in a tiny apartment and trying to save up enough to maybe go back to school. The store sat about half a mile from the highway exit, and during the overnight hours from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, we mostly got truckers stopping for gas and energy drinks. My manager told me on my first day that I could have friends stop by to keep me company as long as they didn't get in the way. That was when I started asking Lisa to come hang out with me. Lisa was my ex-girlfriend. We had dated for about a year and a half before breaking up 6 months earlier. The split was amicable, or at least I thought it was. We had different personalities that just clashed too much when we were together romantically, but we both agreed we made better friends than partners. She was studying to become a pharmacist at the community college and needed quiet places to study. The store was perfect for that. I would give her free coffee and snacks, and she would help me restock shelves when things got slow. My coworker Marcus used to joke that Lisa knew more about our inventory system than half the actual employees. She would laugh it off and say she was just being helpful. I trusted that was true. I never thought there would be any problems between us, and if there were, I figured it would be something small like an awkward argument about the past. I definitely never expected what was coming. It was a Saturday night in late July when everything changed. Lisa had texted me that afternoon saying her younger sister was sick and she needed to stay home to take care of her. I told her it was fine, that I could handle one night alone. I had worked solo shifts before when Lisa was busy with exams, so I was not too worried about it. I rode my bike to work that evening like I always did. The air was warm and sticky, typical summer weather for our area. When I got to the store, I changed into my uniform in the back room and did my usual routine of checking the register, making sure the coffee machines were clean, and counting the cash in the drawer. My shift started out pretty calm. A few people stopped in for gas, some bought cigarettes, and one trucker grabbed 3 hot dogs from the roller grill. By 1 in the morning, though, the store was completely empty. I was in the back room doing a quick inventory check on the cigarette stock when I heard the door chime ring. I called out that I would be right there and finished writing down the counts on my clipboard. When I walked back out to the front counter, there was nobody in the store. I looked around confused. The front door was slightly open, like someone had pushed it but not come all the way inside. I walked over and closed it, making sure it latched properly. I figured maybe someone opened it by mistake and then left. It was strange, but not alarming. I went back to the counter and started wiping down the surface with a rag, trying not to think too much about it. Around 2 in the morning, I was still cleaning when I saw a shadow move past the front window. I looked up quickly, but when I stared out into the parking lot, there was nothing. No cars, no people, just the empty asphalt under the yellow glow of the overhead lights. I waited for a minute, watching to see if anyone would come inside. Nobody did. A weird feeling started creeping up my spine, the kind of unease you get when something feels off but you cannot quite explain why. I shook it off and kept cleaning. Then I heard it. The sound of the men's restroom door opening in the back hallway. I froze. I could not remember anyone going into the restroom. I had been at the front counter for the last 45 minutes and the door chime had not rung except for that one strange moment earlier. I walked slowly toward the hallway and listened. I could hear water running inside the bathroom. I stood outside the door and knocked. "Hello, is someone in there?" I called out. There was no answer, just the sound of running water. My heart started beating faster. I waited another minute, then two. The door did not open. I was about to knock again when it suddenly swung inward and Lisa stepped out. I jumped back, startled. Relief washed over me for a second, but then confusion took over. "Lisa, what are you doing here?" I asked. She smiled, but it looked forced. "My sister felt better, so I thought I would come surprise you." "You could have called first," I said, still catching my breath. "You scared me half to death." "I wanted it to be a surprise," she said flatly. Something about her tone was wrong. She was not acting like herself. I motioned toward her usual spot near the magazine rack. "Well, you want some water or something. You can sit down if you want." She shook her head. "No, I just want to talk." "Okay, sure," I said. I turned to grab a rag from under the counter so I could keep working while we talked. When I turned back around, the look on her face had completely changed. Her eyes were cold and distant, like she was staring through me instead of at me. "Are you okay?" I asked carefully. She did not answer right away. She just kept staring. Then she spoke, her voice low and steady. "Do you remember the last time we fought, before we broke up?" I hesitated. "I mean, not really, it was a while ago. Why?" "You hurt me," she said. Her hands were in the pockets of her jacket. "You hurt me, and you never even realized it." "Lisa, we talked about all of that," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We both agreed the breakup was the right thing. We have been fine since then." She took a step closer. "You think we have been fine?" That was when I saw it. She pulled her right hand out of her jacket pocket, and in it was a folding knife. The blade was already open. My stomach dropped. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I have been planning this for weeks," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Waiting for a night when you would be alone. No cameras watching the parking lot. No one to interrupt us." "Lisa, this is crazy," I said, backing up slowly. "We can talk about this. Whatever I did, I am sorry, just put the knife down." She laughed, but it was not a real laugh. It was bitter and hollow. "You do not get it. You never got it. You made me feel like I was not enough. Like I was just something you could throw away when it got inconvenient." "That is not true," I said, my back hitting the edge of the counter. "We made that decision together." "You made it," she snapped. "You made it, and I just went along with it because I did not want to look desperate." She started walking toward me. I glanced at the front door. It was locked. She must have locked it when I was not paying attention. The panic started to set in. "You cannot run," she said, reading my thoughts. I locked both doors. I looked around frantically for anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes landed on a glass jar full of candy sitting on the counter next to the register. Without thinking, I grabbed it and hurled it at her as hard as I could. It hit her square in the face and she stumbled backward, dropping the knife. I did not wait. I bolted toward the back door, jumping over a display of chips that I knocked over to slow her down. I heard her scream behind me, cursing as she tried to follow. I slammed through the back door and ran out into the parking lot. My bike was locked up near the dumpster. I fumbled with the combination lock, my hands shaking so bad I could barely turn the dial. I heard the back door bang open. Lisa was coming. I got the lock off and threw my leg over the bike. My left arm was bleeding. I had not even realized she had cut me when I ran past her. The pain hit me all at once, sharp and burning, but adrenaline kept me moving. I pedaled as hard as I could, heading toward the gas station about a mile down the road. When I got there, I practically fell off my bike in front of the entrance. The clerk inside saw me and immediately called 911. I sat on the curb, holding my arm, trying to catch my breath. The cut was not deep, but it was long, running from my elbow almost to my wrist. Blood soaked through my shirt. The ambulance arrived first, then the police. A paramedic cleaned and bandaged my arm while I gave my statement to the officers. I told them everything. They radioed for backup and drove over to the quick stop. When they got there, Lisa was gone. They found the knife on the floor and the broken candy jar, but she had taken the hard drive from the security camera system. There was no footage. The police put out a warrant for her arrest, but she was never found. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "I am sorry, I was not in control. I hope you can forgive me someday." I did not respond. I blocked the number and tried to move on. I kept working at the quick stop for another 3 months, but I requested to switch to day shifts. My manager understood and did not ask too many questions. By December of that same year, I quit and moved 2 towns over to start fresh somewhere new. I have not seen or heard from Lisa since that night. Sometimes I still think about it, though. About how someone I thought I knew could change so completely. About how close I came to not making it out of that store. I do not work night shifts anymore. I probably never will again.